Good afternoon, everybody. Looking forward to talking with everybody about the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative and the Integrated Research Management Team, which I'm leading through this project to coordinate all the different projects that we have been looking at over the course of the last couple of days. So, the Integrated Research Management Team, the focus is development, implementation, and evaluation of the Integrated Research Management Team, or what they're calling the IRMT for short. List of the demonstration sites. And our demonstration objectives are actually 10 objectives, which is too much to put on this single slide, but essentially they're just the measures of how well the IRMT is performing at improving the safety, coordinating logistics, synthesis and logistical support, and also minimizing the impact on the host units, because there's a lot that goes on with coordination for these burns, and the IRMT that serves as the primary point of contact for all of the different projects within the Wildland Fire Science Initiative. So as far as progress results, the IRMT is very well established and getting great support from the PIs. They genuinely seem very happy to have the IRMT in place to help coordinate the calls and facilitate connections between the different projects. So right now the implementation outlook is good. Had a successful burn at Tall Timbers last year, and 2022 is going to be a really busy year. As a matter of fact, I will be leaving 2 days after this recording to head to the Osceola National Forest for our first planned burn in 2022. So project funding, no real issues. Like a lot of the projects, we did get a bit behind, just delayed by COVID. So actually requested zero funds for FY22 while we continue to work on the big part of the funding that we got last fiscal year. Leverage support, everything that we're getting is just in kind, and that's just the participation from the different project areas, Fort Stewart, Sycan Marsh, Eglin Air Force Base, and Tall Timbers. They're just helping us using their manpower for some of the planning, logistics, coordination, that sort of thing. So the project team, myself, Joe O'Brien, Nick Skronsky, Kevin Hires, some familiar names probably to many of you. Also Dave Grimm, who is our primary point of contact at Eglin Air Force Base. Matt Snyder, who's actually a new addition to the team, a great resource from Tall Timbers, fully burned, but also qualified, tremendous amount of experience at leading complex prescribed fires and wildfires, and also very happy to officially have Colin Hardy as one of the collaborators on the team, and already putting him to work at the upcoming burns at Fort Stewart, which we'll talk more about later. So the technical objective is to develop an integrated system to maximize collaboration, personnel safety, probability of success, and overall positive impact of the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative, while providing proof of concept for an integrated research management team as a national model via successful establishment and implementation. The pictures that you see here are actually from RX Cadre burns, which are some of the first large collaborative burns, most of them taking place at Eglin Air Force Base, where I happened to be stationed at the time, so learned a number of lessons at Eglin Air Force Base. And really one of the things that we'll talk more about later is the importance of integrated data management. And that was really one of the biggest shortfalls from the RX Cadre. Data was in different formats, that sort of thing, which made it really hard to synthesize the results from the different projects that were there. So the technical approach for the IRMT, it is based on the incident command system, which is the organizational system that is used for managing incidents across the country, whether that's wildfires, floods, even large events like sporting events, parades. Incident command system has basic principles that the IRMT follows, but the ICS provides a line of authority, oversight, integration. Also, we provide guidance to the principal investigators and to SERDP to facilitate inter-project collaboration, data sharing, and safety, and as I mentioned earlier, minimizing the burden on the host units. So how do we do this? We explore, facilitate, share, and utilize project interconnections, and that's makes me think of the Lord of the Rings, and the IRMT is kind of the one ring that binds them. I'm in contact with all of the different principal investigators. We have monthly meetings, actually weekly meetings right now as we are ramping up for the Fort Stewart burns. Also determining the data requirements and synergies, and this is a big part of what goes on in the calls that we have is, how can this project provide data that will supplement and tie into data from another project, with the goal of being able to input the data into these next generation physics-based fire models. And so there's really a lot of synergy that is taking place. Really, truly exciting to be a part of. We also, the IRMT develops and posts the burn locations, timelines, and general planning information. I've mentioned the principal investigator Zoom forums, which typically are monthly, but again, more frequent as we get close to some of these planned burns. During the last IPR, I showed the online file structure, which has grown and become more refined, where all of the different project participants have access, as well as all of the IRMT members. So we have files set up for each of the planned burn locations, where we're uploading maps, incident action plans, COVID mitigation plans, all different types of things, and really pleased seeing how engaged the principal investigators and the staff members with the different projects are embracing the file structure and participating, helping update spreadsheets as we roster for folks coming to the planned burns, that sort of thing. And also the IRMT facilitates integration of other value-added research into the Wildland Fire Science Initiative, and there are a number of examples here. I mean, FASME is one, and it looks like FASME is being funded, so they will be participating, and they have actually agreed to use the same data standards as the Wildland Fire Science Initiative project. So that's a huge win. As some similar goals within FASME, though it's specifically more about smoke. Anyway, that's one example. Another example is research that I found out about with the Air Force Research Lab, and they're going to be integrating into these burns, flying high altitude balloons for gathering IR data on fires. Also USGS, they are working with DoD on satellite imagery from previously classified, or I guess satellites are classified, but USGS is able to get the data and make much of it publicly available. So real excited about that involvement from USGS. And there's an old saying, burn it and they will come. And that seems to be the case with these different research projects. But the IRMT is ready there with a catcher's mitt. And if I guess the rules of the game are, if you're going to come to one of the IRMT facilitated burns, you will share your data with all of the other projects that are on the burn. Sort of a pay-to-play type thing, but there has to be value added, because obviously it's higher complexity, more workload for everyone, the more projects that come in. So we have a screening process that we use for determining which projects will be able to participate in these collaborative burns. So this past year has been really busy and really productive for the IRMT, despite the setbacks from COVID. We were able to successfully carry out some research burns at Tall Timbers last February. Got a few pictures there from the Tall Timbers burn. Also developed an SOP, standard operating procedure, for principal investigators, really laying out their roles and responsibilities as related to these collaborative research burns. What is expected of them both on the burns, what are their roles, but also what are their roles in collaboration between the burns. Pretty much a roadmap for them. Also developed position descriptions for the discipline leads, and later on when I show an org chart that we have drafted for the Fort Stewart burns, you'll see that in the organizational chart we break out by disciplines, not necessarily by project. And there's several reasons for that. It's been proven to work, and it works because some of the projects, both within the Wildland Fire Science Initiative and potentially, outside projects that want to join in, will have similar objectives. Whether those objectives are related to fire behavior or fire effects or fuels, it makes sense to have a lead person for that discipline, and you kind of bake in that collaboration between those projects that have similar objectives. So that's been proven to work really well. Another couple of things that we've developed that I'll go into more depth in a couple of following slides are a site selection matrix, and also just the development of the timeline and determination of locations for these collaborative burns. So have been facilitating monthly video calls with the principal investigators and other people working with the projects. It's not limited to the PIs, and actually having those weekly as we lead up to the Fort Stewart burns. Had very productive meeting, actually gathering at Fort Stewart, site visit, got out in the field with the Fort Stewart staff, as well as a number of folks that are going to be participating in the burns. We've facilitated airborne LiDAR flights, as well as terrestrial-based LiDAR flights, or terrestrial-based LiDAR, I should say. Also have fuels crews that have been traveling to Fort Stewart, coordinating with them to get their safety briefings and the escorts out in the field from the Fort Stewart staff. Over the past 6 weeks, I've had a number of folks going in and doing that pre-burn fuel sampling. I believe I mentioned earlier the integration of complementary research, FASME, USGS, Air Force Research Lab, and others. Also, and this is important, of the 12 Wildland Fire Science Initiative burns, 11 of those have actually given written agreement to use the ESS-DIVE data standards for their data that's being gathered. And those of you on the technical committee may remember my plea regarding the ESS-DIVE demo project and trying to get funding for that last year, and that's come to fruition. That project's funded, and I'll mention 11 of the 12 SERDP projects agreed, and the only one that didn't agree in writing could not, because they were required to use the data standard for their particular agency. But what's really nice is, FASME, which has been funded now to the Fire and Smoke Modeling Evaluation Experiment, they have also agreed to use ESS-DIVE standards, kind of a pay-to-play thing, but they realize that FASME will also be able to benefit from the data that's being gathered by the Wildland Fire Science Initiative projects. So that's really, I think, a huge win that we're moving towards this standardized data standards for all of these different projects, which should significantly improve the utility of the data, and especially as related to use in these next generation physics-based fire models. By the time you're hearing this, we should be completed with the Osceola National Forest burn campaign. So really productive year so far, and looking forward to another productive year coming up. So as far as technical progress, I mentioned the site selection matrix, and I realize this is a little bit of an eye chart, and I don't expect you to read it all, but the story behind it is we had a total between all the different SERDP, Wildland Fire Science Initiative projects, there were 16 different potential sites listed for doing these burns, and the IRMT, I called all the different PIs and gathered the integrated research management team together, and we talked about the drivers for site selection, and we developed criteria and narrowed the 16 down to 6 that we evaluated, and we scored those. We actually looked at have they been able to carry out successful research burns in the past? Are they supportive? How easy or difficult is site access? How complex are the burns? How many different projects listed this area as one of their planned burn areas? What about the use of UAS? Is that easy or difficult? Also, for other aircraft, you get into sometimes difficulties with scheduling at some of the military missions. And so we weighted all of those and scored all these different areas to narrow that number down to the actual sites that would provide the greatest chance for success for the greatest number of SERDP projects. So this is just a screen capture of the current burn planning timeline. Had the tall timbers burn last year in 22. Just have finished the Osceola burns. We've got the Fort Stewart burns coming up, and actually ended up currently planning on 4 burns at Sycan Marsh. Sycan Marsh in Oregon is a Nature Conservancy preserve that really just checks all of the boxes. Very easy access, no smoke management concerns, a wide range of fuel beds, including flat continuous grass to rolling hills, pinyon juniper to ponderosa pine in the uplands, well-established burn history, enthusiastic support. There's been research done there, so there are actually existing data sets. So currently planning on 4 visits to Sycan Marsh. That also allows more apples to apples comparisons between the different burn campaigns that we carry out. And do have Eglin Air Force Base planned for somewhere in the February-March timeframe of 2023. And that'll be all of the burns that the IRMT is currently scheduled to support. So again, another eye chart. Most of you, or at least if you were at the last IPR, saw what we call the spider diagram, which just has the 12 SERDP projects listed, those that make up the Wildland Fire Science Initiative, and it shows personnel connections between those projects. But wanted to just make the point that at Fort Stewart, this shows all of those that are participating at Fort Stewart. So 9 of the 12 projects will be present and represented at these Fort Stewart burns that are coming up. And that's huge. And a couple of the projects are more laboratory based and don't have the field campaign part of it. So nearly all of the Wildland Fire Science Initiative burns will be represented at Fort Stewart. And just some of the things that have gone on with Fort Stewart. I mentioned the pre-planning, the LiDAR flights, the site visit. We put together our organizational chart, which you can see here. We've got maps posted in the online Pinion folders. And Pinion, that's just the Forest Service file structure that's online, that's shareable with outside folks. So making really good progress with Fort Stewart. They're excited about it. They've committed a number of their folks to help with groups, with setup, and also to help ensure safety and that sort of thing. So so far, just been a great experience working with Fort Stewart preparing for these burns. So as far as technology transfer, some of this has been limited, haven't been able to travel much, but symposium poster in 2020. I did present last year at the National Military Fish and Wildlife Association, presented a poster and did a panel discussion talking about the Wildland Fire Science Initiative and the Integrated Research Management Team. I did give a briefing at Fort Stewart when we went there in the first part of December, very well received. I also gave a presentation to the annual program management review for the Air Force Wildland Fire Branch. So had all of the key members of the Air Force's Wildland Fire Management Team nationally there, and again received a number of comments. And I've been working on the Integrated Research Management Team implementation guide, and I'm making really good progress on that. So that's it for the technology transfer. No social media. I don't have a social media person. I'm not a social media person. I don't even have a Facebook account, so I may not be much help on that one. And I'd be happy to answer any burning questions that anyone may have.